Has Biden talked at all about a public option? He ran on that in 2020. He hasn't even mentioned it since. So to act like Biden is somehow implementing this progressive agenda and it's not working is so incredibly dishonest. And Lindsey Graham knows he's full of shit, but it's the only way he's able to even attack what Bernie Sanders is saying here. Now, let's go on to the next clip here where it's about gas prices. And it becomes very clear how correct Bernie Sanders is and how Lindsey Graham has no ability to combat this in any way.
So I would ask you to focus on lowering gas prices, securing the border, and bringing law and order back to America. And the only way you're going to do that, Senator Sanders, is abandon the agenda that you've charted for America, because it is not working.
Well, let's talk about gas prices, because you're right. They are outrageously high. In Vermont, they're now filled up the other day, $5.05 a gallon. Meanwhile, the major oil companies made $35 billion in profit in the first quarter of this year. And at the end of the year, it is estimated they're going to give $88 billion in stock buybacks to their wealthy shareholders. So I do think we have to do something about the outrageously high price of gas. I think the president should bring the major oil companies in and tell them we're going to have a windfall profits tax on what they're doing in order to stop them from ripping off the American people. You know, the last time that oil prices were at $118 a barrel, which is what they are right now, roughly speaking, average gasoline prices at the pump were $3.83, not over $5 a gallon. So I think in the midst of what is going on in this world, and that is the war in Ukraine and Russia oil and the stopping of oil, I think what the oil companies are doing is taking advantage of that situation and raising prices to an outrageous level, which is hurting the American working family.
All right, so I got some tabs on this because, of course, Bernie Sanders is 100% correct. And Lindsey Graham, as a representative of the establishment, as he even nodded along in that first clip to Bernie saying that, and a representative, because of that, of capitalism, Graham has no, retort to this. He can't combat this because Bernie's exactly right. The issue is corporate greed. So looking here at this graph, this is from Representative Diana DeGetti, if I'm saying that correctly. The price of oil is down 20% from its peak earlier this month, but the price at the pump has stayed near record highs. Big oil is raking in record profits while the American people feel the pain at the pump. If these companies don't act now to lower gas prices, Congress will. So look, price per gallon of gas has stayed roughly the same. Meanwhile, cost per barrel of oil down considerably. Why the hell is this happening? Purely because of corporate greed, because they are allowed to do this. If they are allowed to do this, they will do it. They will try and get as much profit as they can because that is what they do as a corporation. That is their responsibility. So unless you control that in some way, which Biden is not doing, he's not doing what Bernie's telling him to do. Unless you try and control that in some way, this is going to continue happening. So, more graphs here. Oil prices and gasoline prices disconnect. This is in Canadian, but it's, similar result here for Americans. So you see here, national average gas price way up here in the light blue. Meanwhile, crude oil price all the way down here. You could also look at U.S. gas prices. Again, has increased dramatically with the profits of the 4 large oil companies. Funny how that works. And another piece here from The Guardian. Largest oil and gas producers made close to $100 billion in first quarter of 2022. This is from a month ago. Shell made $9.1 billion in profit, almost 3 times what it made in the same period last year, while Exxon raked in $8.8 billion. This is corporate greed. They are allowed to do this, so they will do this. That's the problem here. The fact that private companies own a natural resource. If you want to actually fix this issue, and Bernie, is not going to go this far because he knows this is not possible with the current Congress, but nationalize the industry. If you want actual energy independence, Lindsey Graham talks about energy independence. He mentioned that several times in this debate. Actual energy independence would be the American people owning that natural resource, which they do not. Private companies do. But of course, Lindsey Graham also not going to bring that up. Now let's get to the next clip, which is on why Medicare for All won't pass.
What we need is a government that represents all of us and not just wealthy, powerful, special interests. So that is what I am working on. What I believe, you talk about, will Medicare pass on the floor of the Senate tomorrow? No, it will not. But the real question is not whether it passes or not, it's what the American people want. And you know what the American people do want? They do want Medicare for all. You talk about the joys and beauties of private insurance. Talk to the millions of workers who lost their private insurance during COVID. So I think it is time for the working families of this country to stand up, demand a government represents all, not just the few.
So I'm calling on Senator Schumer to bring Medicare for all to the floor of the Senate sooner rather than later so we can vote on it. Because if the American people want it, and those people who vote against it should lose their job. That's the way it works.
Again, with this bullshit. Is this how it works, really? If that's how it worked, then you would have 80% of Congress getting replaced because of the approval rating. Right now, you have only 20%, according to a Gallup here, 20% approval rating of Congress. So why isn't 80% of Congress getting replaced? Because money buys elections. Money dictates who your two choices are. Now, sometimes you're lucky and get, a progressive that sneaks through who is not bought by big dollars, but usually that happens in a state like New York or California, not often anywhere else. So because of that, you have a record low approval rating, yet these people stay in because money buys the elections. Regardless of who wins, you have a pro-corporate candidate. And at the same time, about 40% of people don't even vote. So those are the people that Democrats have to actually speak to with a candidate that is fighting for the working class. But this is the issue. So this is why a incredibly popular policy like Medicare for All, which I've covered a million times, incredibly popular in polling, this is why it will not pass the Senate or pass Congress, because you have people in positions of power in government that are not actually there to represent people. They are there to represent corporations. And Lindsey Graham goes to this line again and again, despite Bernie, calling out his bullshit here. It proves Lindsey Graham knows he's full of shit, because it doesn't matter how many times Bernie Sanders calls out the actual reason that popular things don't pass. Lindsey Graham will not acknowledge that because he himself is bought by corporations. That's why he is there. Now let's get to the next clip, which is about the crisis in democracy.
I have a lot of problems with the Democrats, but they are far superior to where the Republicans are. And let me give you an example. When we talk about major crises, I think many leading political scientists will tell you that right now we're looking, for the first time in my lifetime, and yours, at a real threat to the existence of democracy in America. And you know why? Because we have a former president, his name is Donald Trump, who goes around the country telling people, hey, I won the election. In fact, I probably won it by a landslide, but they stole it. They took it away from me. All right? Now, that happens to be what we call a big lie. And yet many of the Republicans that Senator Graham are asking you to vote for are maintaining that big lie. What does that mean? It goes beyond Trump. It goes beyond the 2020 election. It means what they are saying is the entire system, you can't trust anybody. And if you can't trust the election results, then what is the obvious alternative? We need a strong man, all right? Conservatives went to, I think it was Hungary, to meet with Mr. Orban, who runs an authoritarian type society. So the struggle we're facing is not just that Lindsey and I disagree on this or that issue, which we do. It is the future of American democracy and whether we move to authoritarianism based on, among other things, a very big lie.
Well, quickly, can you address that, Senator?
Trump lost the election.
Can you address that, Senator? I mean, can you say definitively the election was not stolen?
Yeah, I voted to certify the election. There was some mail-in balloting chicanery out there, but no, I voted to certify the election. President Biden's the president. And whether
Did he
Trump
win the election?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about all of the candidates out there who are trying to say that he didn't? Your Republican candidates that you want people to vote for?
Well, what about the people saying defund the police? You talk to them, I'll talk to that crowd.
Well, your crowd is a lot larger than my crowd.